Last time on Xenoblade Chronicles 2. This time on Xenoblade Chronicles 2. The party find themselves in quite the dark area, but with some pretty effects falling through the air. Everyone seems to be okay, save for the Titan Umang neglected for a while, but being okay is only so reassuring when it's so dark, especially when viewing a lot of damaged stuff that also seems to have been consumed by this massive Titan. Dromart informs us that the Orions live towards the back of the Titan, so we need to find our way up there. Poppy informs the group that someone might be approaching the area, but nobody else seems to notice it. Wretch jokingly says that it's a ghost, which Nia does not appreciate, and Wretch feels a brief moment of satisfaction having found a weakness of Nia, but Nia also notices Pyra has seemingly gone missing. Lo and behold, she was just nearby, and she sort of unintentionally sneaks up on Wretch, giving him a little scare that immediately causes him to lose any and all sense of superiority he felt over Nia in that instance. Between Wretch, Pyra, and Poppy, there's no amount of darkness that can stop us though. And allow me to introduce you to the head of the Orion Titan, which is the start of the best area in the game so far. Before we can get anywhere, the game informs us that a new stage has been added to Tiger, and there's also a chest here with our first technical manual of the game. This will allow us to create new Poppy Swap parts at any time without needing to rely on RNG of Tiger, but that's not important since it only gives us a couple new things at this point. What is important, though, Cue about an hour of Tiger before I determined that there would be very little for us to gain from playing it a bunch at this point, but it never hurts to try for a Fire Absorb mod, as Absorb mods can make some fights significantly easier than they would be otherwise, story or not. At this point though, I took a few days break from recording, and briefly during that break, I decided to run around and grab more core chips for the crew, namely some turquoise chips that I don't think I've ever used before. I got these from some sweet flyers, I hate saying that, in Dormont, which at this point I believe had red tags, but I was still able to beat them thanks to our solid crew. I equipped one to Poppy to nearly triple her auto attack and even increase her block rate a little bit, and another to Dromart for more or less the same thing. I should also mention that I'm in Argentum because I wanted to see if the smithing shop here had anything new, but from what I can tell, it won't get anything new until Chapter 4, which makes sense considering that's when the story tells us to come back here. Spoiler alert. I also stocked up on Narsopear jellies since we were kinda low, and from here on out I simply do not care about how much gold I'm using, DLC money gift be damned. I make a few watch cores, most notably for the time being this special level 2 plus 1, which I made so Dromart's level 2 special would be hitting just a little bit harder, and by extension, healing us slightly more. Here's how Poppy is set up, and it's time for me to face off against my arch nemesis once more. Heading back down the left side of Gourmont, we give Sniping Brent another attempt, now that our damage and Nia's healing are all just a tad bit more powerful. Same thing as before, this asshole loves to spam Feather Vein of Pain, which does a randomly distributed amount of AoE damage, and it can get overwhelming very quickly. Thankfully, with our stats on Poppy and Dromart being much higher now, we're able to keep up our health for the majority of the fight. After a certain point, Brent starts throwing in a couple of hawk shots that inflict slowdown, but I still hate those less than Feather Vein of Pain. However, there was something incredibly important about this fight that I had forgotten about. Once Brent hits 50% of his health, he summons extra enemies to fight alongside him, and they're higher level than he is. Safe to say at this point that our odds of winning dropped to 0%, and I proceeded to get steamrolled. Yay! So, with that one promise I made last episode out of the picture, I decided to run back to Araya, which is probably my second favorite area in the game, the first being not available until Chapter 7. The place has quite the atmosphere about it, knowing that you're inside of a living and presumably breathing entity. Just look at this stuff. After a bit, the music changes from a very Tephra Cave-esque song to a beautiful area theme for the Orion Titan. I absolutely love this song, which is why I won't let you listen to it in full. Instead, you get to watch as I speed up 10 times against what I believe are the only lizard-type enemies in the entire game. Why this particular enemy type is almost always underutilized in Xenoblade, I don't know, but it sure is. I wanted to see what sort of drops I might get from more modern area enemies, but ultimately nothing of particular note comes up, save for a skill chip I give to Suzu. We take a brief look at what I believe is the next unique monster after Supercharged Alfonso, level 23, Implacable Dylan, as well as a unique monster to fight way later in the game, level 65, Vampire Bride Marion, which isn't even the highest level unique monster we could have run into. And I don't know, I think maybe Rodbard is the highest level we could have fought at this point, but I'm not entirely sure. That sounds right though. I don't even know how much of this is going to get included in the video anyway. We make it to the Jebus Cavern, where things seem to brighten up just a tad, because the Orion Titan has a translucent hide. Before we can determine our next course of action though, Big Daddy shows up alongside his lackeys, who immediately recognize the Emerald Core Crystal as the sign of the Aegis. He makes fun of Rex, calling him a pencil-neck shrimp, and all I can say is, I think Rex took this a bit too personally as he got older. This Bigipon wants the Aegis, and he's willing to fight for it, telling his buddies Yu and Zuo to deal with Nia and Tora, because, you know, he wants to beat up a child doll on his own. You would probably expect this to be a one-on-one fight, right? Of course not, that would be stupid for Xenoblade. But what if I made it one? Now, narratively speaking, it probably would have been more fitting to 1v1 Vandom here, because, you know, duh. But at the time, I was more worried about actually winning the fight, so my strategy is to have Tora and Nia focus on Zuo, who I believe has a taunt art, while Rex goes ahead and 1v1s Yu. The reason for this is that Yu has both a break art and a smash art, and preventing him from being able to fight alongside Zuo, who has a topple art, and Vandom, who has a launch art, helps prevent us from getting absolutely annihilated. Kohana has the defenses needed to prevent us from taking a bunch of damage on Rex, plus our natural evasion is very high thanks to the Amethyst chip on Pyra, and any damage we do take will be easily healed off by Nia in the background. Tora can tank just fine on his own thanks to no chance of being toppled or, heaven forbid, even launched, so this strategy mainly just helps prevent us from getting comboed into oblivion. Some other things to note about Yu specifically is that his break art gives him perfect evasion, and he has an AoE knockback art that can be... I hate saying knockback art. That can be annoying. Standard driver rules apply though, and if you're using the DLC, I highly recommend the auto balancer if not using a bit ball or ether cannon. Drivers tend to have near perfect block rate when going for a special, so getting interrupted out of any evasion or potential heal on hit arts would not be fun. I don't have access to that though, so for the most part, I mainly just hope for some good luck. I went into this fight not really expecting this to work very well, but surprisingly, we take down Yu without any concerns at all. After that, I have Rex move on to help with Zuo, who at this point is below 50% health, and has nothing all that scary to offer against us, especially being weak to the water element, which Kohana can deal with very nicely. Moving on to Vandom himself, he's got plenty more health and does a mite bit more damage, but honestly, the only things to worry about at this point are Crushing Twister actually doing a solid bit of damage, and Fast Twitch giving Vandom perfect evasion. Other than that, I'd say Vandam is pretty much a piece of cake.
What's the matter?
The fight ends and we're greeted to Vandam taunting Rex a bit, before trying to attack him but being stopped by Pyra, who notices that something is off about Vandam. Rex tries to hit him with the projectile attack, but silly Rex, he doesn't have a proper art for that, so of course it's slow. Rex continues to pelt Vandam with pea-shooter attacks, none of which are landing, but he's so desperate that he doesn't even hear Pyra say that she can't supply power that quickly. Man, talk about a low affinity moment, am I right? Anyway, Vandam ends up with his back against the wall, but he knows he's fine because as Rex goes for one final attack, Pyra collapses from exhaustion, and Vandam uses that moment to charge at Rex, ready to decapitate him. He holds back, of course. A Xenoblade protagonist is only allowed to die once during a game. Vandam calls Rex a noob and gives him a driving 101 lesson about how drivers borrow power from blades, channel that power into their weapons, and then let loose with an art. He says that there's a limit to that power, but as we'll learn later down the line probably, the only limit this game truly has is the damage cap. Everyone stops fighting, with our crew being a bit confused, but as it turns out, Vandam isn't a bad guy. He runs a firm nearby, which when I first played the game, I thought he meant like a doctor's office or something because of the word infirmary, but no, they're just a bunch of well-rounded mercenaries in a small village. He says he'll give us some food as a bit of thanks for letting him spar with the Aegis. Pyra mentions that towards the end she realized that Vandam meant them no harm, and Rex calls him strange. Which, yeah, he is, but frankly, more people should be Vandam strange. I decided to pull some blades at this point as a bit of a celebration, but I forgot to record the process of actually opening up the core, not to mention I skipped the animation in personal time, so just know that for what's about to be shown, this is being pulled on Nia, and it's very popular in my honest opinion.
I'm Ursula. Pleasure. Shoulder to the wheel. Right, Barry?
Ursula is by far the most support-heavy blade we've pulled so far, though for a variety of reasons, most players come to really dislike her. In a game where big number generally should go burr, she just doesn't offer much in the way of high damage, she only has one Ox-Core slot because Monolith hates some blades, and her ice element isn't particularly grand in most fights. Her personal quest is also considered by many to be the worst in the game, possibly even the worst across all the Xenoblade games, though I can't confirm how people feel about every single quest. For our purposes, all of her skills are actually solid enough, as keeping aggro off Nia is preferable, the affinity match barrier is nice, especially given how 40% is not a terribly small number for a level 1, and the heal on switch is nice on Nia in particular, since she'll be wanting to swap often from her break and launch arts. Speaking on a much more personal note, Ursula is one of my favorite blades overall, though there may be some bias to that, since I vaguely remember her being one of the first rare blades I ever got, either the first or second, with the other being Gord, who is also one of my favorite blades, though for that part I may have just convinced myself he's one of my favorite for reasons unknown to me. We pull a few more blades, but ultimately nothing is worth mentioning, and I immediately engage Ursula on Nia and proceed to swap to her. I give her a fast blade switch Ox-Core just to make her able to swap around just a tad bit faster, and equip the bronze chip I got from a chest, on the way here, that I'll quickly be replacing. Look at these two. How could you hate these two faces?
Hell of a story.
We make it to Darfont Village, where Vandam tells us that they regularly check to see what sort of stuff the Titan eats, in case there are supplies they might need. But for the time being, all they found was us. Welcome to Darfont, with quite possibly my favorite town theme in the entire game. Well, the night version anyway. I think there's a day theme, and I like it just a tad bit more, though both are peak, as is most Xenoblade soundtrack. Unfortunately, it's a bit quiet
The
here, and the
village
characters
has
start talking before
a
the
lot
good
of
part
children.
really kicks in.
Lots of drivers and
The group
guides
notices there are a
here
lot of
too.
children here, and Vandam explains that the most of them are war orphans that were taken in while on the job, which is very respectable. They don't force them to become mercs or anything though, what they do with their lives is up to them. Again, very respectable. Vandam says he's getting hungry as Rex looks at the village with a particularly happy smile on his face. It probably reminds him of home a little bit for reasons we'll learn later in the game. We're free to look around the village a bit, so I decide to do just that. I start by checking out the informant for reasons, and then I proceed to steal an overdrive protocol that we'll almost certainly be using at some point during this playthrough. We open a couple more containers, and then buy a couple infantry vests from the accessory shop, which is a decent HP increase that could be helpful occasionally in this chapter. I buy a scale chip for Ursula, Parrish, and then we go ahead and accept the food offer. Pirate goes to grab Vandam a beer, which, hearing Pyra say beer always gives me whiplash for some reason. Rex appears a bit despondent, and when Vandam questions him, he asks if Vandam fights in wars. He's worried they might be trying to recruit Rex and Pyra, but Vandam claims they aren't that desperate. Rex is marginally relieved by this, but Vandam continues to question the matter. He notices Rex is a salvager, and presumes that Rex must have salvaged his own fair share of military supplies. As we know, Rex tries to avoid that sort of thing, but Vandam has quite the truth to present him.
Compasses, valves for ether stoves. Armies need all these things. That bread you're eating, it's made from Ruska flour, supplied by the Ardanian government. This world's full of war. Don't matter if you're a soldier or not. As long as you're alive, you're in the war, some way or another. Don't you think? Life can be cruel. Crueler than you know. That's why I set up this little band, so I could protect the people I care about. Rex, you're the driver of the Aegis. The whole world's gonna try and scalp you. You realise that? How are you gonna live when you've got everyone gunning for you? It'd be easy to run. All you need to do is ditch that girl. Come on. Gotta get ready.
Where are we going?
Just follow me, kid.
After Vandam wanders off, we're meant to explore the village a tad and prepare for whatever he wants for us, but all I really do is grab some pouch items. I grab 5 Generosity tea and 5 lentil milkshakes, and I immediately use all of the Generosity tea because it's one of Pyra's favorite things, and I believe it should apply to a later note on her affinity chart. Not sure if I'll have to grab some more later. Afterwards, I give Rex a lentil milkshake as it's just a decent all-around item, though there are technically more helpful items that I'll be grabbing in the next episode. I take a moment to check everyone's affinity charts just to see what I need to do to unlock them, since neglecting affinity chart notes is the worst possible thing I could do. I also talked to this battle observer guy who basically trashed unique monsters, and it's doing this that makes me realize I never actually beat Sad Bernard for some reason. Oops, we'll deal with that momentarily. Before we do though, we check in with Vandam, who briefly talks about his weapons, the dual sides, which apparently are a weapon completely unique to him and Rock. He also mentions that his only blade is Rock, even though plenty of people use multiple blades apparently. Nia calls him out, saying he just can't be bothered to come up with more than one strategy, but that's only so true as we'll see later. Real cutscene time, and Vandam tells us about a job he got to check out a weird ether reading near the blowhole of the Titan, and offers us a temporary mercenary job. He even says we'll get paid. Vandam is in the party now, and I decide to swap him into the party over Rex because I can, giving him an infantry vest and muscle belt for accessories. On his skill tree, we can actually unlock the single most important skill on a driver's skill tree, in this case being called Burly Chain, which allows you to cancel a driver art into another driver art, speeding up combat significantly, and in some cases later on, even completely removing the concept of auto-attacking. Unfortunately, it'll be a bit before Rex and Nia can get it, and quite a while before Tora can get his version of the Arch Chain. I also grabbed Muscle Accelerator 1, which allows Vandam to use the art assigned to X at the start of battle, and 10,000 push-ups, which is just a 20 increase to strength. I give Rock the fusion combo up Arch Core, as well as the Affinity Max Attack 1 I had on Kohana, but if I may make a suggestion, the Critical Up 2 might be better than Fusion Combo Up. I take control of Vandam to show him off just a tad, plus I want to remind myself of what it feels like to use the Arch Chain stuff since it's been roughly 3 years since my last playthrough of 2 that lasted that long. I also do these fights to grab Rock's level 1 sickle and swoop skills. They aren't particularly important, and honestly not using Vandam at all is probably a smarter way to play Bringer of Chaos, just because he has little to offer aside from his decent HP stat and decent launch art. But there's no reason to use him. But there's no reason not to use him. Well, unless your goal is to beat up a plant, because fuck me are these things a pain in the ass. After losing to that thing, I say heck it and Nia into the lead since having control over switching is good, plus I want to use Ursula personally for a bit. You know, it's personal. We walk up to what seems to be a swirling ball of dark gas, which Vandam calls an ether miasma. Think of it like a fart, except the gas has yet to leave your body. The stuff is poisonous, so Rock gets rid of it through the power of wind, and we're moving on.
Hey, look what I found!
Congratulations.
We make it to the Sternum Arch, and I decide to use this landmark as a good chance to completely break the flow of Araya and go do a bunch of affinity node collecting. And by a bunch, I mean just a couple nodes here and there. I grabbed Pyra's level 2 Flame Nova and Purifying Flame nodes, which I beat up Brent in the process of doing so, Poppy's level 2 Naponic Iron and Leaping nodes, and Dromart's level 2 Aqua Wave node. There might have been others, but I forget, and I won't bother you with a lengthy anecdote of my adventures. I fucking hate myself in scripting. Just know it took a bit, and a lot of it was done off recording. I return to the Sternum Arch, and about midway through this large room, I swap Retz into the front of the party, and have Tora on the sidelines, as Retz is about to get the most important upgrade of the entire playthrough. Well, more or less, anyway. At the top of this room, we run into an Arden, and Vandam asks Retz if he is any good with that anchor. Retz says well enough, but Vandam knows a thing or three, so he shows Retz a better way to use it. Vandam does some weird manipulation of physics that I'm not convinced is entirely accurate, and the move ends up toppling the beast. Retz is impressed, and Vandam tells him to give it a try, and with the Arden now angry and on a bit of a rampage, it's time to fight. The rampaging Arden starts in rage, which is initially very terrifying until you realize that he's balanced around this fact, and isn't particularly strong as a result. Retz can topple now with Anchor Shot though, and this is considered one of, if not the best topple art in the entire game. It still gives a basic HP potion as well, and topple itself gives another HP potion on top of that. Now, for this particular fight, Pyra in general isn't actually perfectly ideal as the enemy is fire element, meaning it takes reduced damage from fire damage. Though, weirdly enough, one of its attacks can inflict the wind element blade combo, which I think is one of the only cases a non-driver enemy is able to inflict a blade combo. Something good to note about this fight though is that because the Arden starts out enraged, it seems to take significantly increased damage from water element, which is excellent for our case thanks to Kohana and even Dromar. The most dangerous thing that the Arden really has is Horn Dance, a multi-hit AoE attack that does a solid bit of damage. Breath has a bit of forward AoE, but that's not a big deal with Rex here, and Tape March could also be scary, but again, the AoE is fairly small, so it's not a big deal. It really is just that stupidly strong Horn Dance that could potentially cause problems, but the fight is otherwise not too bad, even with Rex and Nia being a few levels below it. After the fight, Vandam gives Retz a bit of a proper lesson about arts and how to be a good driver, even talking about arts that take advantage of your enemy's strengths, but my only assumption for how this gets applied to actual gameplay are the arts that do extra damage to, say, insects or aquatic enemies, those types of things. Otherwise, this is complete horse malarkey, and Vandam has no idea what the hell he's talking about. He says that a driver is meant to use those arts to protect his blade, which I think Doodle needs to hear this because Vandam would definitely lay him flat. Vandam says that if Wretch can use Pyra's power properly and protect her, then he'll be a true driver. Wretch isn't overly confident, but Vandam says that the anchor shot technique took him 5 years to learn, while Wretch managed to learn it pretty much instantly. This is the third real time that Wretch's potential has ever been noticed as far as I'm concerned, as back when Wretch met Malos for the first time, he even complimented him a bit there, and Sever said something similar while on the Maelstrom. Vandam even says that Nia and Tora are handy, and that they'll be fine together.
Biggie Pon has scary face, but he very nice.
Suss me out, Furry Pon.
Back in gameplay, though not for long, I do a bit of accessory swapping, though all I really do is give Rex and Nia both an infantry vest for a little bit of extra HP. I also give Vandam the Abyss vest and champion belt I had on Tora before. From here, we beeline it for the Soul Crown Summit, which is where the Ether reading was found. Here we find a recently deceased Titan, and Azurta ominously states that it's likely it wasn't due to old age, though he immediately follows up by saying it could have been an accident or an attack. Right after, we see our probable culprit, a giant spider that for some reason is accompanied by a blade. 'Cause you know, monsters can have aptitude, I guess. This fight is not easy if you aren't prepared or aren't doing something specific for a strategy, especially on Bringer of Chaos, and many Bringer of Chaos regulars consider it to be the first real wall of the playthrough. Well, aside from maybe the Chapter 1 alley though. The Elder Arachno immediately opens the fight up with a Queen Bite that thankfully misses, and expect to see that Queen Bite text a lot. The blade that the Arachno has at its side is also capable of using arts similar to how the Doodle and Dome's fight worked. In this case, the first art that gets used is Brutal Lance, which is weirdly an AoE attack. While not insanely strong, it's still something to try to avoid if possible. Like all driver fights, whenever the blade is in the middle of doing a special, the driver's block rate goes up exponentially, which can make evading the specials a bit rough. My main goal here is to really just swap between Kohana for evasion and break, and Pyra for the newly acquired topple art. A simple plan as far as plans go, but this fight is largely about survival, which getting off those topples and launches for potions is a good help for. The blade's second special is Termination Blast, which is a surprisingly wide AoE and does a lot of damage when it hits, and he uses it just enough to make it, in many people's opinions, the most dangerous attack of this fight. It does about 1100 damage to Vandam, but Rock isn't particularly defensive as a blade, so that doesn't tell us too much. The spider's second attack is Queen Bomb, a staple attack of large Arachno in the series, an AoE attack that inflicts blowdown on the party. This can also be very dangerous given it's an AoE around the user rather than in front of it, but the thing to note about this move is that you can actually break the Arachno mid-art to stop the bomb from going off. This is very helpful on Bringer of Chaos specifically, since it's not exactly a weak move, and blowdown always sucks to deal with. We take down 15% of the Arachno's health before we noticeably start to get very low on our own. We shortly after lose the fight, as we are underlevel and don't really have any dedicated tank character outside of the occasional swap to Kohana. This means that aggro is constantly being moved around, and it's just not ideal for keeping our health up, since nobody is really eating any hits particularly well. I do a bit of who really knows what, and then re-enter the fight, but it goes even worse than before. It's kind of a trend with these fights, huh? I skip travel back to Garfont for a bit, checking all the nearby field skills to see if there's something maybe that we can grab to help us in the fight, but no, there's nothing at this point. Which means it's quest time, and I think the most interesting currently in Garfont is this quest with Jaros, who mentions that a bunch of kids left the village to play mercenary for a little bit, which usually just entails them getting supplies the village might need. Jaros asks them to stop, but kids will be kids. And by that, I mean they always do the opposite of what you asked of them. He says it's normal for them to be back late, but this time they're especially late. Jaros can't leave his post in the middle of the village where seemingly nothing major ever really happens, so we agree to go look for them. All we need to do for this quest is skip travel back to the spot where we first washed up in Oriah, where we find the kids being attacked by a few Crustic. These enemies are quite a bit under level compared to us, but since it is Bringer of Chaos, I wouldn't underestimate them. That said, per usual, multi-enemy fights are less intimidating thanks to Dromart's level 2 special, so we managed to grab the victory. We talked to Jelved, who seems to admire drivers quite a bit, before saying they need to head back to the village, and then doing just that. We report in to Jaros, who is relieved that nobody is injured, but before he can give us our reward, Jelved interrupts, asking to become our apprentice. He says he wants to become an apprentice because his parents, who were drivers back in Gormott, were supposedly betrayed by one of their friends. I mull over this decision for a long time, as I'm not actually entirely sure what the best option is, but I go with my gut on what Rex would say in this situation, and tell him that he can't be our apprentice. He gets angry, as any kid does when an older person says no, but Jaros says that he agrees with our decision, and that revenge is never the correct answer. Maybe we'll get a resolution to this side plotline later on, maybe we won't, who really knows. Jaros gives us our relatively pointless reward, and I stay at the inn and level everyone up to 21, except for Vandam, who I make 22. Ursula interrupts us, asking to visit the Cobalt Cliffs, but without the use of a specific glitch, we can't reach that particular landmark yet. I could do the glitch, but I ultimately decided not to. For now. I return to the Elder Arachno fight, where I realize a second too late that I, for some reason, have Henny equipped, so I input the Stewie command, which will instantly kill us no matter where we are. This is generally done in case you somehow get stuck somewhere and can't get out, I assume, but the community has a far more practical use for it.
You put your feet up over there. All right, Gramps?
I do this for about 4.5 minutes before I finally let the Arachno finish me off, and then it's time to do the fight again for realsies. We're doing a bit more damage this time, though my RNG with breaks and evasion seems to be significantly worse than before, so Rex is constantly low on health. It's during this attempt at the fight that we get a view of the Blade's third and seemingly final art, Hellbound. This art has a ton of hits to it, but I think Termination Blast is still generally more dangerous. We get the Arachno about 46% of the way down before Rex finally falls, and per usual this generally signals the beginning of the end for a fight. Before everyone truly falls though, we get a glimpse of what a Rage Strike Termination Blast looks like, which we see 2 hits go off on Vandam, both of which do over 500 damage. And need I remind you, he only has about 3000 health at this point. That is an absurdly high amount of damage, which is quite frankly, not okay. Rex dies immediately after, and for the next fight, I decide to take Vandam out in place of Tora, and I also get Tora the placebo effect on his affinity chart, which boosts the effects of HP potions by 20%. I'm not sure if this is actually just for Tora or not, but at the very least, it should mean he gets a mite bit more healing from all the potions we tend to spawn. Having Tora in the party will allow us to have a more consistent and readily available topple art, as Rex wants to primarily be using Kohana, while also being able to tank well enough for Rex to be able to more safely swap over to Pyra, if ever needed. This fight goes about as well as usual for the first 15% or so, but once he gets off that first Termination Blast, Nia immediately drops to below half, and before she can get her health too far back up, the Blade uses Brutal Lance, which somehow only hits Nia. She's still alive, but she won't be getting back to full health until the halfway point of the fight. After about 20%, Rex also gets hit by a pretty fat Termination Blast, though he does avoid half the attacks, and spoiler alert, this is the last time Rex's health goes below half. Sure wish I could say the same for the other two, though, D. For the first half of the fight, Tora and Nia just keep getting repeatedly beaten and battered around, like they tend to be in most cutscenes, really. But thankfully, not even a rage-strike Brutal Lance can take away their chance to breathe. Though I will miss all that party gauge. After enraging, the Arachno is actually a water element now, which means two things. Whenever the blade uses a special, it'll do incredibly small amounts of damage over time. The other thing is that Pyra now hits a fair bit harder, given the weakness to fire, which is great, because it means I can start doing volcano combos for solid damage over time. I'll also say that up to this point, I forgot a key detail about how fusion combos worked, and it won't be until the next chapter that we can really take advantage of the absurd potential of both fusion combos and damage over time. There isn't much new to really say about the rest of the fight, but we will be ending the next episode not long after the fight, so I think I'll let it play out, providing my own horrible attempt at talking about the fight without a script. Starting now. Now, meaning after the volcano damage over time ended, because I felt like that's the best point. The blade there goes for Brutal Lance, which I think did less damage than Tora got healed for, which is kind of neat. Unfortunately, knockback doesn't work on the Arachno, which is kind of a shame, but makes sense given the size, and also it's a boss fight, so of course it has to be immune to every little thing that you could ever want to do to it. Because, you know, that's fun. I had a pandemic going right there, which didn't do a lot of damage, but, I mean, it's a little damage over time, which is something. Unfortunately, I got hit by this blowdown, and I'm not entirely sure how, to be honest, because I thought I must have been, like, frame perfect at the end of my animation. And you can see here, Tora actually dies, which normally would signal the end of a fight, but thankfully, we're kind of stacked right now, except I still haven't res Tora, so there he goes, now he's up. And the blade is going for Hellbound, which does absolutely nothing because I managed to get dual slash off in time. And I want to say again, Katana Rex is one of my favorite classes to play as, or like favorite driver blade combos. I don't remember how good the third or the fourth art on this class is considered to be. I don't think it's considered as good because not having a break art, an evasion art, or an attack increase art would just suck compared to what is just an aggro up art. I am trying to do most of my art planning around the meta, but for some weird ones, like we'll see in the next episode, I may change things up just because I think things are a little bit cooler looking. The Arachno is basically dead now at this point, and with the volcano going off, it is done.
The blade returned to its core.
The fight ends, and the party comments on the whole monster resonated with a blade situation, which Tora is not happy about since he doesn't have the aptitude. Poppy cheers him up, and Vandam says that when a driver dies, a blade returns to being a core crystal, but after a bit of time, it'll start glowing again, and a new driver can resonate with them. The caveat there, though, is that they'll have no memory of their previous driver, which is real sad to think about. Pyra chimes in, saying that memories can be painful, and that so long as the core remains intact, a blade can effectively collect an eternity of bad memories, before immediately apologizing because she is suddenly trauma dumping out of nowhere. Vandam gets things back on track, and goes to the Titan to collect a core crystal, saying that core crystals come from Titans. He even compares it to a state for some reason. Drivers and Titans die, but the blade lives through it all in their own way, a never-ending cycle. Pyra praised as the Titan disappears into the ether, or something like that, I don't know, and Rex silently thinks to himself about how Pyra already had a body when he found her, and wondered if her old driver was still alive.
Could her old driver still be alive somewhere?
Anyway, brief gameplay time, by which I mean I decided to end the episode by pulling for blades, as that fight gave us 2 common cores and 1 rare core. Normally, I would probably split this as 2 common on Rex and 1 rare on Nia, But I was feeling particularly generous, so I gave them all to Rex, as I wanted a specific element on a decent blade for Rex before the chapter ends. First up is an Earth Axe that who cares. Second is an Ice Maiden Lance that, while lances have an excellent kit on Rex, doesn't have the greatest skills in the world. Third up, Aoi here will be temporarily joining the starting lineup, as Ice is the element in question that I was hoping for, and I just think that playing around with an art kit that I never really have before would be fun. Her skills are solid, and Rex's Bitball kit, while not excellent, has an attack that heals on hit, which is fun, I guess. Between episodes, I end up hunting down a bunch of chests in the hopes of finding a decent courtship for her that isn't the wood chip in Gormott. When next episode starts back up, I'll pull some more blades on both Rex and Nia, and it'll likely be the last bunch of blades I pull for the chapter. Next episode will also be where Bringer of Chaos really puts us to the test, but I think we're more or less ready. I'll see you guys then.